Hello, Wellness Fam, and welcome to yet another episode of Dungeons and Wellness. So happy to have you with us today. My name is Michelle, and I am your DM and host of DNW. And joining us today for this Clarity episode, we have Kim.
Hello.
Hi, Kim.
Hi, Michelle. How are you?
Doing all right. Happy
Good,
holidays.
good. Happy holidays.
Yes.
New Year, sort of.
Sort of. Almost there. Almost. Yeah. Seeing your face makes me miss Drake of Housebreak. Yeah. And of course, joining us, we have Michelle.
Hello. Hi. How's it going?
It's going. Thank you for bringing the holiday festivus.
Oh, yeah, I'm all about being festive.
Yes. Oh, my goodness. I totally forgot, and I'm just wearing a Flash t-shirt, so thank you for the holiday.
Still festive.
Yeah. It works. It works. All right. So for those of you who have seen Dungeons and Wellness and are returning customers, you'll already know how this works. For those of you who have not, or maybe this is your first Dungeons and Wellness video, basically this is a clarity episode where we'll be talking about the last play episode 2, the things that happened on that episode, and just some thoughts about how we can learn from that episode and take lessons from that episode and apply them to our real lives. Because D&D is a role-playing game where we have the opportunity to learn so much about the way we move through the world and take those lessons to make our own lives better. So, right off the bat, just want to open the floor. Do either of you have anything you want to say? Any burning kind of points that you want to make about our last episode? It's okay.
Let's not all go at once.
It's okay if not.
Well, I haven't watched it, so I'm looking forward to actually seeing the clips and stuff. It's
yes.
Raw reactions.
Yes, I love that. Absolutely. And one thing, see, I'm just putting things down. One thing that I do want to emphasize about Dungeons and Wellness is that the goal is not perfection. We're here to just go through those real experiences together. So Kim, good point. Maybe it's better if we just kind of jump right into the videos. Get real-time feedback. So here we go. In the first clip that we're about to see, you'll see Rand. Rand has a little kind of experience. So without further ado, backstage, can we get our first clip of the day?
Rand, where did you go?
I didn't trust that goblin. I chased him down and yeah, he turned and he took his knife out on me. So we fought. So I had no choice. I had to kill him.
Oh, wow. Okay. Are you all right? I mean, that's pretty intense.
Oh, yeah, I'm okay. Yeah. He would have just, you knows Rand's kind of stuttering a bit. He seems nervous. He would have just gotten some other goblins and probably chased us down in the middle of the night.
Nifty reaches over and puts a hand on his shoulder as far as she can reach, even though she's short of stature. But
down.
Yeah. And she says, "But is this the first time you've killed someone?"
I've never fought before.
That's got to be pretty intense, man.
Yeah.
He turns around, he just he pukes.
Yeah, that's legit.
Puts the sword back in the sheath, and he's like, "Oh, maybe we can get something. Maybe we can eat something. I'm getting kind of hungry."
Yeah, we can keep walking. We can talk about it later if you want to. We don't have to talk about it later.
Sure,
but, you know,
sure.
whatever you need, we can
Yeah,
find
he
some
just
food.
he just walked with his head down, like yeah, it's cool. It's cool.
Yeah.
He's
All
not
right.
really looking at you guys, like yep.
Oh man, that was
So
super
that was-
interesting.
Yeah, that was a pretty big moment for Rand. Kim, to fill you in, a goblin jumped out at us and at first ran away into the woods. But then, as you saw, Rand ended up chasing and slaying it. So I definitely noticed that right off the bat. I really loved Steve's portrayal of how Rand would kind of almost be in shock right after that happened. And he was just kind of like, I've never fought before, like still processing.
Mm.
And to me, that reminded me a lot of how sometimes when traumatic things happen, maybe when we look at movies and TV shows, we expect this huge reaction like, oh, how could this happen? But sometimes people react kind of by freezing in that moment.
Mhm.
And it can take some time to actually get to that point where you process and recognize all the emotions that are in response to that huge event.
Mm-hmm.
Right. It's very like the idea of somebody killing someone. It's not normal. At least in the real world. In the D&D world, I guess it's normal. For Rand, it's not normal though. So
Yeah.
it makes sense that he would freeze that way. When we're in the middle of a fight or flight, there's also a freeze response. And that's basically what, well, actually, at first it sounded like he was doing a fight response.
Mm-hmm.
He'll first ask questions later.
Yeah, I was gonna bring that up too, because it almost sounded like he was responding in self-defense. Because he said, yeah, that this goblin just came out of nowhere, and he took out his dagger, his knife, and so he just like reacted accordingly, without stop and thinking first before thinking about what the consequences would be to that. Probably because he wanted that glory, that moment of being able to do something and having that achievement.
It's also the idea of an adventure, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is technically his first adventure. And so whatever experiences from other people that he heard about adventures, it's about, fights here and there, combat, whatever. So this, to him, is what you're supposed to be doing. Right? And the perception of goblins equals bad, then this is the target. I'm an adventurer on an adventure, and this is a goblin, this is the villain, so I'm gonna kill him.
Right. Wow. And so like maybe it was like partially self-defense, and maybe it was just him kind of putting pressure on himself based on what he thinks is expected of him as a new adventurer.
Mm-hmm.
Fascinating. Oh. And I feel like that connects to the whole idea of like, I guess, feeling these messages from society about things that we should be doing or are supposed to be doing based on who we happen to be.
Yeah.
But
Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see Rand in a moment where he's like, well, do I have to? Like, do I really have to kill this goblin?
Mm-hmm.
An introspective Rand.
Right.
I've had clients that they're all female. They're in their 30s or 40s, and they wonder, what's wrong with me? And it's because they're single, and at the 30s and 40s range, you're supposed to be married already, have kids already. So they're in therapy because the anxiety of the expectation to be the nurturer, be the mother. You know, this is, I mean, if we talk about gender roles, we talk about racial roles, it's all embedded in us and we don't even realize it sometimes.
Right.
Absolutely.
So it's like if you put this in a D&D context, maybe, you know, every person should have been adventuring by now or have that experience, and then live to tell the tale. Like in Rand's instance, like his father already knew a whole bunch of things about the world, about society, and now Rand has to figure that out for himself, and it's all like the societal pressures on him, probably.
Yes. And I love that you brought up like his father, because I feel like a lot of these learned expectations that we have come from kind of those people around us in the beginning of our lives when we're kids, just growing and just learning about what the world is and how we're supposed to move through it. And so the people closest to us at the time, like friends, family members, maybe teachers, the messaging from those people can really, really influence what we internalize and carry into our adult selves. And so actually, this ties in really nicely to another clip that we have where here Rand reveals to us where he might have learned some of this goblin equals bad and the fact that he doesn't trust goblins. So can we cue up that clip, please?
Why not? You can't trust them. They're all the same.
What makes you think that?
Goblin's a goblin. What my dad always used to say.
Well, have you ever questioned your dad? Maybe he's...
Why would I question my dad?
You know, there are other, creatures out there in the world.
Well, he was right, wasn't he? I mean,
Guys, I think there's something up here. I'm not totally sure what it is.
Oh, bless you.
Thank you. Like I told
What do
you.
you see?
I told you guys. He turned and he tried to fight me. There's nothing I could have done about it.
Yeah, no, that sounds really scary, man. I'm glad you're okay.
Caesar, can you... So I don't know like if Steve included that like as like a pointer, but I really did appreciate him kind of building that backstory for Rand, showing us that maybe it's a family thing. Maybe it's like a town, like a cultural thing within Denaria where Rand comes from. But this whole idea of goblin equals bad. He's thinking about specifically where he learned that in his life, which I think is a really cool skill, to be able to look at your own learned kind of automatic thoughts and saying, okay, well, where did I learn this from in the first place? Like, where is it coming from? I think it's cool to be able to engage with those thoughts like that.
Yeah, it's interesting to me, especially from Nifty's point of view, because Nifty has already kind of traveled before. So she's naturally curious. And to have, Rand be the opposite of that and just respond in such a way that he never questioned his beliefs before until that moment, until Nifty asked him, why do you believe in such a thing? Oh, because my dad told me to. But sometimes there are other perspectives out there.
Yeah. And this is really how biases are formed, how we learn as human beings. And you were touching on it, Michelle, just now. The way to break that, break that is to experience new things. which is why it's actually really, at least nowadays, it's hard to break away, especially with the internet, where there's dysfunction, right? Where if you look for, I don't know, let's say pet food, and then all the ads about pet food just come up. You guys know that.
Yep.
That phenomenon where you just randomly talk about, I don't know, babies, and then suddenly baby things come up out of your feed. And
Oh, yes.
what it's funny and all that until you look at the impact of people who have firm beliefs and they research on those beliefs, and the search engine feeds on that, and then you go deeper and deeper into a hole, so your beliefs are more, it's strengthened rather than challenged. So it's really important for people who have strong beliefs to actually seek out people who have different beliefs. It's not necessarily wrong or right. It's important to have a holistic perspective.
Right. And that whole searching for a specific thing to, you know, amplify your experience. Isn't that called like confirmation bias or something?
Mm-hmm.
I could be wrong. Okay, cool.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah. No, go ahead.
Oh. Well, I was going to say, I would love to hear, I guess, Kim, your thoughts on, I guess, that whole concept of resistance to changing our learned thoughts and our learned thought patterns. Because at the end, I noticed like Nifty was asking Rand, like, well, you know, if you learned this from your dad, have you ever thought of questioning your dad? You know? And Rand responds with, why would I question my dad?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think, especially considering audience out there in the future, if you can't tell, it's the holiday season. See Michelle's hat. And one thing I think that comes up a lot, especially in holiday season, is when people gather, either physically or virtually, whatever. People come together, and a lot of the time, certain topics can come up. People clash, especially in the modern era where people are arguing about literally everything that we can possibly argue about. And so when, I guess, in a moment where you're talking to a family member and there's just, you're not seeing eye to eye, maybe one of these learned biases are coming up and there's just that resistance where you just feel like you can't talk to them. Would you have any tips for people in that kind of situation? Like, how do you handle that so that it doesn't end up just blowing up into a huge argument?
Okay, so first of all, in terms of change, right? There's this concept that everyone, I don't know if everyone knows, but it's called homeostasis. It's the idea that people in general or environments seek stability. It's just nature, right? Where we want to be stable because being unstable feels uncomfortable. When you seek change in any behavior that's been there all this time, a habit, right? It needs to break the homeostasis. It needs to break the stability. And people don't like that, especially with family dynamics, right? When belief systems are embedded within a family structure for generations sometimes. So when somebody tries to, like, for example, in Asian cultures where you have to respect the matriarch or respect the elders, right? When somebody wants to, I actually want to be a musician rather than a nurse or a doctor or a lawyer, people go, well, why? Your uncle's a nurse, your so-and-so is a doctor, so-and-so is a lawyer, why would you change? And then it's very discouraging for somebody to break out of that because we, at the core of it, we all seek acceptance, especially with family. So it's hard. I don't know if that answered your question. For those of us who want to break out, who seek to break out from family, not completely, but just
Like breaking the cycle.
grow, to find yourself, right? Yeah. Outside of your family, it's important to set firm boundaries. And when I say firm, I don't mean aggressive. That's never the answer. It's more of, like, please respect my decision to be a musician, or hey, that rhymed. My decision to be a musician. So
I love it.
Yeah. Setting firm boundaries and talking it through with the person. If the person truly understands and is truly supportive of you, they'll hopefully understand. If they don't, then number one, you give them time. Number two, if they continue not to, and they continue to be unsupportive of you, you are faced with a crossroads of, do I shut them out completely? Do I leave my family forever? Or in pursuit of my happiness? Or do I stay in the family? And that's it's a tough decision.
And it's a two-way street, isn't it? Where, yeah, you can hope for the best, and you can try to get your family to accept you and understand you. But they also have to put that step forward as well in understanding.
Yeah. They're going to want to change. But if they don't, if they're set on their ways, then you got to decide if you want them in your life. And if you do, how do you deal with it? How do you cope with it?
Right. Yeah. I'm hearing like a big part of it being the sense of control, and just recognizing at a certain point that as much as you can want or hope for a family member to be different, at the end of the day, they are not under your control. So recognizing that, how do you reconcile yourself with the reality?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, if they never change, then like, what is your way forward?
Right.
Absolutely. I've actually been thinking about the idea of hope recently, in a different way, because earlier in my life, I would be like, oh, I hope that this will happen and this will happen and things will be like this. And I'm recently recognizing that a lot of the time we just kind of make up fantasies about, oh, the world will change and this will suddenly fall into my lap and the stars will align. And we have hope for all these things that aren't actually real. And I think we do the same thing when it comes to difficult family relationships, and just like hoping that this family member will suddenly be so open and accepting of us, and they'll do a total 180 one day and everything will be okay. And we'll have the relationship that I always dreamed of having with this person. And I'm recognizing that when we tie our happiness or our state of being, our well-being, to that dream that might never actually happen, then that's almost like a roadblock in our own healing process, where we just can't accept reality. And so with the tough family dynamics, it's interesting around this holiday season, the kinds of thoughts that come up when dealing with different family members and different types of interactions you might have.
Sometimes reality is too much, though, that people do go to fantasy, and they specifically choose to live in that fantasy because it's hard to deal with reality. The pain is too much. the thought that comes to mind, actually, for those of you Marvel fans out there, go watch WandaVision. It's awesome.
Still need to watch it.
I really love.
Same.
Oh crap. Well, I'm just saying it challenges. See, I can't even talk right now just because you guys haven't watched it.
Sorry.
Well,
I've watched Hawkeye.
It's okay. We're behind the curve. You can probably give like a couple spoilers and it's
All right,
fine.
I need to do a spoiler alert now. Spoiler alert, WandaVision. Do not like skip to, I don't know, in the editing process, skip to wherever we stop talking about it. Okay, so in WandaVision, okay, we all know that she lost Vision, right? That's an Endgame, or no, in Infinity War. Oh, spoiler alert for that.
Before the snap.
Before the snap.
Yeah.
Thanos had to take the stone, so I mean, it's in his forehead. Anyways, digressing. So she created an entire reality where Vision exists, a reality where her hopes and dreams came alive. You know, she chooses a simple life. She chooses a normal life with Vision. Because the pain of dealing with that grief is so much. It's too much. So it's difficult to grasp, you know, to process, I mean.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I can totally see that being part of somebody's process, just like slowly coming to terms with reality. And that feels like it would be one of the early phases.
Wow.
Yeah. Denial.
Denial is real. I mean, and at the end of it, the reality will come back to you, right? It's always going to be there. So no matter how much you suppress it, put it aside, you're gonna have to deal with it later. So I mean, it is a way of coping, at the same time knowing that if you put it off too much, the reality too much, it'll hurt more.
Yeah. So connecting this back to like Rand and his reality, I think this is like such an interesting opportunity where Rand can start to pursue in a deeper way, like, okay, so what is my relationship with the idea of goblins now? Like,
right.
Now that I recognize, like, oh, I've actually learned this bias, this negative stereotype. I've learned it from my dad and from people around me. So what are my actual opinions, like separate from what I learned from my dad and whatnot? And who knows, like maybe Rand will go forward and end up like having a friend who is a goblin in the future.
Or
that'd be awesome.
or
he may recognize, well, I do recognize that there are goblins out there that don't fit the stereotype. At the same time, if I embrace this new belief system, I may be rejected by my father, rejected by my family, my culture. What do I do? And then he has to wrestle with that. You know, like, what will happen if he goes back after this adventure and he knows so much more and suddenly he doesn't fit in that society anymore, you know?
Right.
So generally though, when somebody experiences new things, it shapes them. They can't go back. There's just no way.
Right. You've gotten a taste of the truth. Right. Wow. That is so interesting to think about. Like if Rand goes back and he has more insight and awareness, how would he react if people reject him? Like Rand, and Rand is such a proud, Denarian, and he is so eager to defend the Denarian identity.
Do we know if he's close to his dad?
I think that was implied, although I'm not 100% sure. I don't want to speak for Steve.
Right.
See, can you imagine if he was close to his dad and he has all these beliefs about goblins, and now he comes back and says, "Oh, here's my goblin friend," or
Right.
"Here, I'm dating this goblin friend."
Oh my gosh.
Or
Can
he
you
somehow,
imagine?
or he somehow polymorphs into a goblin and it's permanent or something.
Yeah. Oh, Dad, I'm
Yeah.
a goblin now.
Sorry.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. And
It's
like
hard. It breaks that homeostasis.
breaks that homeostasis and it puts Rand in a position where he has to make a difficult decision.
Yeah.
Wow.
Dad has to make a difficult decision too.
Right. Wow. Oh, okay. I have to prepare myself to
Put
play
that in the
Rand.
plot, Michelle.
Yeah. Young man, I'll practice my Rand's dad voice. Wow. Okay, so I guess also speaking of like deep-seated these fixed beliefs, I also picked out a clip where we saw actually no, before we get to this clip, I also picked out like a really brief 15-second clip of Nifty just being the most supportive pal ever, because like I've just noticed that Michelle, I don't know if this is how you normally are, but
Yeah.
like just
It's not.
yeah, okay. Just you see people struggling and then you just have this like almost intuitive way of just like gently reaching out and showing curiosity and care at the same time, and it just really is so wholesome and heartwarming. So I wanted to spotlight that for a second. Please show us Nifty being the sweetest.
As we're walking north, I quietly say to Rand, I threw up my first time too.
I feel kind of sick, actually.
That's understandable.
Damn. Michelle would never do that for me.
What? I don't know what you're talking about. But no, this is interesting to me because we haven't dealt with Nifty's background yet, per se. So I'm very curious to know what happened to Nifty. Why? What was that first time kill encounter that she threw up, and how, as the ranger that she is, how that occurred? But that's an episode for maybe in the future to understand who Nifty is. But yeah, I think because of her past experiences, she understands and knows the aftermath of killing someone. So she would understand how to maybe console someone, how to maybe walk someone through that experience, because it changes you. I can only imagine anyway that it changes you in a way that she will want to help. And I think she's a natural helper. Why, I don't know,
Yeah.
but we'll see.
I really like that clip. It actually hit me. It hit me. I don't know the full story, and that whole thing really hit me because it shows compassion, and it normalizes what could have been a traumatic experience for Rand. Right? Killing someone, seeing a goblin for the first time, where he's like, danger, it's a goblin, right? Seeing that for the first time, killing someone, taking someone's life is actually a big deal. But we'll talk about that another time. But that's traumatic. And Nifty may have potentially reduced the possibility of it getting worse, or possibility of it becoming more than it is, by just saying those words. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I I think that one part of going through a traumatic experience is also just that feeling of isolation afterwards,
Mm.
And that feeling of like, oh, I am alone in this trauma. Like, this is something that I have to drag myself through, like, somehow by the skin of my teeth. And I think it makes such a huge difference to have somebody be like, hey, I see you. You know, I was there once too. You're okay. You okay? Okay, you're okay. And just showing that compassion, like you said. And I think thoughtfully sharing a little bit of your own experience to connect can be so helpful to help people feel a little bit less alone in those scary moments. Like, not saying give them like a whole TED talk about how you had the same experience and it was also terrible, and so you shouldn't worry. Like, don't discount their experience, but I think a little bit of sharing to show empathy is a wonderful thing.
Yeah. For those of you out there who are helpers, who naturally want to help people, careful with sharing or maybe oversharing, or, oh, I was exactly like in your position. That word exactly, it's actually very invalidating sometimes for people. Because no matter what experience, no matter how similar your experience is, it's still a unique experience for somebody, right? You're not the exact same person as the other person. You know, they may have different thoughts and feelings about it. You know, maybe a parent dying for you is traumatic and a parent dying for somebody else is celebratory. it's completely different.
Yeah.
So make sure it's warranted.
Yeah. It's not about you.
Yeah.
Don't make it about you.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It can be difficult though. I guess like this might be a good opportunity. Like, especially now as people are kind of becoming more conscious of their trauma. And people I feel like collectively the world is becoming more aware of like mental health issues and things like trauma.
Mhm.
And so if we happen to be around someone and we see that they are experiencing some sort of like internal thing, trauma related response, then is there like any tool or any advice that we can give for people who want to show support but don't
When
know
they're
how?
currently triggered in the moment, or because that's two different things. When somebody
Okay.
is currently triggered, like you literally see them having a panic attack, then it
Mhm.
becomes more of a safety thing, right? So you help ground them, ground them, like giving them a glass of water, coaching them to take deep breaths, things like that. If it's not like that, if they're not reacting that way, and they're just talking about, not just, but they are talking about their trauma experience, and then you want to support them and you don't know how, ask them. You can ask them, what will be helpful for you right now, right? Or what do you need from me right now?
Wow.
That could be helpful.
Wow. There you go. I think a lot of the time when people see someone else really struggling or going through a difficult moment, sometimes like people can feel nervous if they
Yeah.
don't have like professional training, and they have the best intentions, but
Yeah.
like, oh no, what if I say the wrong thing and this
Yeah.
person is already struggling? I don't want to say the wrong thing and make them suffer even more.
Mhm.
So in those kinds of situations, I love that advice of just asking, like, is there any way I can help? Like, what do you need from me? And just giving the other person the space to voice their needs. And I think that removes a lot of ambiguity and makes a space for clear communication, which is so important in the healing process.
Generally, when somebody says, I don't know, to that question, because that's probably what some viewers are going to think. Like, well, they say, I don't know all the time, Kim. I don't know what to do. Because when I ask, what do you need from me? Well, I don't know. That's common too. Generally, listening to them is a huge deal. You know, if you know that person really well, picking up on their favorite things, like, you know, let's go to dim sum. Oh my god, I love it. I love dim sum.
It's been so long.
Yeah, or if it's more of an invitation, right? Do you want to go to dim sum? Do you want me to pick you up something? Do you want to get ice cream or whatever it is, right? Offering suggestions rather than dictating what the person is supposed to do to feel better, because you don't know.
Wow. I love that. And just always giving them the agency. Yeah. I love that. You heard that, viewers? So if they say, I don't know, make some suggestions, get the ball rolling.
Okay, well, if it doesn't work and it gets worse, please do not come after me.
Of course. And actually, I love that we're bringing this up right now, because like one thing that I do like to talk about sometimes, like when I'm working with people, it's just the whole idea that what you see on Instagram and YouTube, Facebook, social media, like social media and online content is not the same thing as individualized care and individualized therapy. And so like in this kind of setting, you know, it's the three of us and we're like, all right, like we have some knowledge that we can share with you. Here are some good general tips. But please remember that they are general tips. And if you are working with one person in particular, you know, that one person has their own set of like background and context and struggles and their own like beliefs. And so the amazing advice that works really well for one traumatized person might not work as well for another traumatized person. So please don't come after Kim. She is giving general advice, not individually targeted advice. Cheers. Just wanted to put that out there. I got your back, Kim.
Yeah.
Oh man. All right. So what do we got here? All right. So another video clip. So in this next clip, the party was walking through the woods and they came upon a camp. And I think in the end of the last clip, Caesar had just like discovered a tent, or there was some sort of structure. And basically that ended up being a campsite where there were a few people, 3 men, all called Vic. So we had 3 Vics. And when they found out that the party was coming from Denaria, they had a very negative reaction. And basically it turns out that they had all these like stereotypes, biases, and preconceived notions that Denaria is just full of burglars and thieves and scoundrels, and it's a very unwholesome kind of place. So Caesar and Rand and Nifty are there. Caesar's trying to use his intellectualized approach to reason with the Vics using logic. And then Rand, well, you'll see. Rand doesn't like what they have to say about Denaria. So let's get our next clip going.
I will say it is possible that there are some bandits from Denaria, but I would like to point out that we are probably the best suited group of people to take care of that situation. Having roots in an area, you know, we could serve as sort of like a cultural mediator. You know, I feel like this would be a pretty solid job for us to try to, you know, intercept these rogue Denarians. It's possible that there are some. It's possible, you know. I'm not
Red will
saying that-
stand up and he'll start reaching for the sword in his back and say, "That's all lies. My people are good people. We don't steal from anybody." He's like fumbling, like, "Where's the handle of the sword? Where's the handle of the sword?"
Well, I'm just saying it's possible that there is at least one person who is stealing, and that doesn't necessarily make them a bad
I'm
person.
not yelling at Caesar. I'm yelling at these guys.
Okay.
Right. And Vic the Third, his eyes widen and he puts his hands up and he just backs away. He goes, please don't hurt me. Are you going to hurt me?
So he'll whip out the sword still with goblin blood on it. He'll say, "Don't insult my people."
Oh, Rand, you didn't clean that up first. You're supposed to clean up your sword before sheathing it.
And before you guys start talking ill of my people, you better watch out for your people, because there are ferocious goblins in these woods. See that blood? That's goblin blood, boy. I'm going to try to put it back into my sheath without, like, cutting my head.
Vic the Third just bursts into tears. And he turns around and sprints back into the further tent.
I'll tell Vic the First that you shouldn't let your boys go around spreading lies like that. There's no pit. There's no bandits. There's no anything like that in Denari. It's a peaceful farming community. I've heard a lot about you Loudwater people, though.
And
you're out, you and your drinks that you make up there, and all the rowdiness, and you're not really like our sort of people.
I'm going to try to diffuse the situation here a little bit. Just as a quick side note, we keep talking about the pit, and
all right. So I thought that was pretty interesting. It almost felt like tribal warfare to me a little bit. And I noticed that when Rand was kind of talking about how insulted he felt, it almost felt like he was a little bit triggered. I mean, and this word is almost overused at this point, but it felt like he had such a strong emotional response that he was unable to hear kind of what Caesar was saying. And he was just really caught up in his kind of defensiveness at that point.
I mean,
Thoughts?
going back to his belief systems, right? He only knows Denaria and all the things that his father taught him. So of course he would be super defensive about any bad mouthing that would occur against like anything Denaria. But then he also came back at that and said, "Hey, I heard also these kind of rumors and bad things about Loudwater, about you people." And that is sort of like, well, everybody has their own opinion about each other. Who's right? You know?
Yeah. I've recently, actually, that made me think of this whole, and this is like a very sensitive topic, just putting that out there now. But when it comes to the race-related political issues that we have seen really boil up to the surface of society, at least in the US, especially over the last couple of years, I find myself reminded of that situation because it feels like there are these different minority groups who are all experiencing oppression of some sort to some degree. And all the different oppressed groups have the potential, right? Like in the most perfect world where nobody has trauma that they have to work through and everyone wants like a peaceful world. It's like all of these people could come together and kind of, well, decide that, yeah, okay, we're going to be allies for each other and we're going to try to like overlook our differences and we're going to try to have like that kind of generous mindset towards each other as opposed to a divisive, polarizing mindset. And I find that in some like communities, because of perhaps the trauma, and of course, like it's so complicated for everyone, and I can't speak to everything that's going on. But I feel like in some communities, because of that trauma, it becomes more like we've been so hurt, and almost as a survival, as a defensive thing, we have to keep ourselves separate from others. It's us versus them. And so we will kind of, stick to our community and keep ourselves safe, but block other people out. And when I guess like when I talk to some other Asian American friends and they talk about how like, oh, like people of other ethnic groups, they don't like Asians, and they don't want to be friends with us. And this makes me think of just like, well, that's also kind of a preconceived notion that you're carrying that separates us from them. And so maybe, if we all kind of work on this idea together, then maybe instead of us versus them, it becomes more like allyship and crossing bridges where it's like, yeah, like you come from Loudwater, I come from Denaria, but like maybe we can try to find some things in common as opposed to focusing on what divides us.
That's going to be difficult to achieve, especially when like your belief system is part of your identity. And when you challenge someone's identity, it becomes an attack. So preconceived notions of that, it comes from your parents whom you love, right? Or society or your culture where you grew up in, you thrived in. Like, and even if you do get those lived experiences, you have to make that conscious choice that some people might not make that choice because it's too uncomfortable.
Right.
So I'm going to choose a safer example of roller coasters. I'm totally scared of roller coasters. I feel like I'm going to die. I know that I'm not going to die. I'm just not going to, I still don't do it. I still have preconceived notions of that roller coaster, of any roller coaster, because that's how I live and it's comfortable.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And these two groups are making large assumptions about each other based off of what they supposedly know about each other. And I mean, the fact that this conversation or the conversation between the two groups is even happening, I feel like is one step forward. I've always been a believer of, hey, just have a conversation first and see what happens. And sometimes you don't get that opportunity. Yeah. And I mean, a lot of the times you don't. It's just a matter of circumstance and being at the right place in the right time. But yeah, just starts with one and then it snowballs.
It's also very difficult when you are open to the idea of changing, and then because your belief system is so embedded in you, you unconsciously actually look out for confirmation of your own beliefs. So for example, they get together in a family dinner or whatever, a festival, right? And then Rand does something he didn't mean, like he bumps into somebody or whatever and spills, I don't know, goblin juice. I have no idea. He spills something, and suddenly everyone's like, "Oh, see, I knew it. I knew these people are not civilized or whatever." So, part of that is also acknowledging that that can happen, and being aware that you're in your journey of changing your belief system, your filter for your current belief is higher. So yeah,
I love that.
yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like that can be part of the process of learning to be comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And not to say you have to go throw yourself on roller coasters. Like
That's never gonna happen. I
And
mean, I
that's
tried it. It didn't
Yeah.
work.
Oh, well, see, you tried it, and
Never
there you
again.
go. Yeah, but see, it's just a roller coaster, so it's fine. Just whatever, man. But then, like, when we have those same feelings about growing and like challenging our belief systems, like you said, then it's where I feel like that's where we have to practice our mental discipline, and I guess like becoming or for me, it's been a process of, and I first kind of encountered this idea through yoga, actually, but just learning the fact that sometimes, yes, you may feel uncomfortable, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's not right.
Let's talk about yoga for a second here. So with yoga, there's a point to this. So
Okay, I'm ready.
with yoga, the reason why it's so effective for a lot of people, it's a form of grounding technique. You're listening to your body, right? You're being mindful. And that's really one of the first things that I do with my clients when they're is first of all to ground them, second of all to pay attention to the sensations in your body, pay attention to sensations and then the thoughts, but sensations first, because that's arguably easier to determine because it's there, right? Your heart is racing. You can tell that your heart is racing. You can't tell your thoughts sometimes because they're all over the place, but paying attention to the signs of, oh, I'm getting anxious right now. That means I'm getting triggered right now. So then the next step would be, what's going on? Who's around me? Is somebody triggering me? If there's nobody triggering me, what am I doing? What I'm doing triggering me? Where am I? Is my environment the one that's triggering me? So being able to gain that insight and identify what's happening, it works wonders. That's the first step. Yeah.
That's
For
amazing.
change.
Yeah.
Yeah. You don't know what you don't know.
Exactly. And I think that's such an amazing tool for those moments when our emotions feel so big and overwhelming. And I know that in my past, like there have been times when my emotions feel so big, and it's almost like in hindsight, it feels like the emotions were controlling me. Like the emotions grabbed the steering wheel and I was just being all types of whatever I was in that moment.
Yeah.
And those kinds of things, like the grounding techniques and kind of coming back to the sensations in our body, like that is such a great way to be able to separate ourselves from those emotions and regain some of that control.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a good pro tip. Viewers, grounding techniques, do some yoga.
Some grounding techniques other than yoga, if you're not a yoga fan, could be just reading a book or listening to music. Self-care, walking around your neighborhood if it's a safe neighborhood. If it's not a safe neighborhood, going to a safe park. Listen. Oh yeah, I said listening to music. I looked at my headphones and I'm like, music. I don't know. Gardening is a big deal for a lot of people.
Yeah, getting your hands, like doing something tactile, which is also like nurturing at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that if people have some sense, like if you out there know that you enjoy some hobbies, or there's something that you were passionate about in the past, and maybe you haven't done it recently, what have you, like maybe those hobbies like gardening, like listening to music, can become good grounding techniques that become part of your own mental wellness practice. Make time for the things you love. Wow, this turned into such a wholesome conversation, you guys. Amazing. Okay, so we have just hit the 1 hour mark. And so I feel like this is a pretty good point to wrap it up. Do either of you have any final comments or anything else you want to talk about before calling it?
Happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. Play more D&D.
Wow.
Michelle was waiting for that moment.
Yes.
I know, like she was prepared for that. All right. Okay. I guess that's it. Enough said.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, I agree. So ditto to all of the above. Thanks, Michelle. And hey, like, take care of yourselves out there, guys. This is the end of 2021. I had to look at the calendar. I forgot what year it was, but this is the end of 2021. Now we're going into 2022 in just a few days, or no, in a few hours. So yes, in this new year, may you be blessed with healthy routines and self-care, little bits of self-care sprinkled throughout your days. And I hope you are able to shed light and love into the world, and to also share light and love with yourself as well. And that is my wish for all of you. Thank you for being here.
Bye, y'all.